Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful Reedville neighborhood in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy that you're part of our Reading with Your Kids family. Thanks so much for subscribing to us on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you find your podcast. And we can be found everywhere. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Himalaya, and of course the iHeartRadio app. We have a great guest for you today. One of the spooky middle grade authors, Kim Ventrella, telling us about her brand new book, Bone Hollow. If you're the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And if you're the author of a great children's book, you are also the head of your business. That's right. And your business is the business of selling your great children's book. And you want to do it right. That's why I think you should check out readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile, INCFILE. readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Inkfile helps you quickly and easily form your LLC, S Corp, C Corp, or any other business. Start your business today for as little as $49 and state fees. There's no contracts. There's no hidden fees. Inkfile has been trusted by over 150,000 businesses worldwide since 2004. Check it out today. Remember, you are the head of a business once you write your great children's book. You want to do it right. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile, INCFILE, readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Joining us right now from spooky Oklahoma City. Well, I've never been to Oklahoma City, but if our author is there, then there has to be something spooky about it, because she is part of our great friends over at Spooky Middle Grade Authors. Please welcome to the show the author of the brand new spooky book, Bone Hollow. Her name is Kim Ventrella. Kim, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to know that Oklahoma is very spooky. I never thought of it that way, but of course it's spooky.
Of course. You have to share some of that spooky. I've never been to Oklahoma City myself. I was telling Kim I have some friends who are living in Oklahoma City right now. They haven't told me anything spooky yet, but you are creating so many spooky, fun stories, and the latest is Bone Hollow. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. Bone Hollow just came out last week, and it is definitely spooky. So it features 12-year-old Gabe as the main character and his dog Ollie. And Gabe lives with a woman named Miss Cleo. And Miss Cleo really, really, really loves chickens. She raises prize chickens for a living. And she has her favorite chicken is named Princess Carmela. I mean, she's a big-time show-winning chicken, but at the beginning of the story, she gets stuck on the roof of Miss Cleo's house. So, of course, who does she send onto the roof to rescue? The chicken, but Gabe. So Gabe has to climb onto the roof. He's trying to rescue this chicken that is just not cooperating, and a storm starts up. So it's raining, it's lightning. It looks like a tornado is coming down, and yes, the tornado swoops down. It carries away Princess Carmela, and it carries away Gabe. So the next thing he knows, he wakes up. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what's happening. All of his neighbors are suddenly terrified of him, and he's not sure why. In fact, he arrives at his own candlelight vigil, and they actually chase him out of town. So he's confused, he's scared, he's running with his dog Ollie, and he's only rescued when he gets to this mysterious hollow in the woods, and he meets this strange girl who leads him to her cottage where she lives all by herself, and it's called Bone Hollow, and she's definitely a very mysterious character. But what he learns is that she's not just a strange girl who lives in the woods. She's actually Death with a capital D, and she's wanting Gabe to follow in her footsteps now. So it kind of builds on the world that I started in Skeleton Tree, but it tackles it from a different perspective, and it's a standalone novel with lots of mystery and adventure and, and heart and laughs as well.
Wow. Wow. Talk about taking readers on a wild and spooky and fun ride.
Yeah, it's definitely a big journey and a big adventure for sure.
Yeah. Now, before we started the interview, I was looking over Kim's resume, and it is quite fascinating. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of her past experiences. But is there anything in particular that led you to writing middle grade work, and in particular writing spooky middle grade novels?
Well, I think part of it was just the type of stories I liked to read when I was younger. My very first story I remember writing was back in second grade, and I know that it was a version of Roald Dahl's The Landlady. So it was basically fan fiction, and I remember exactly what I changed in the story. But that was the first story I remember writing, and I know that it placed in a writing contest back then. But that's a very creepy story, and you can actually read the full text online. So if you haven't, check out The Landlady if you're looking for a scary short story. But I also really loved those scary stories to tell in the dark collections with the really creepy black and white illustrations. Those were one of my favorites. So I think it was kind of natural that I ended up writing spooky stories for a middle grade audience, but that's not what I first started out trying to write. I first started out trying to write for adults and a little bit for young adults. And then it wasn't until I got into middle grade that I really found a voice that felt more natural. So there's just something about that age group. There's a sense of wonder and a sense of like innocence, but curiosity about the world as well. And I love to dive into that voice. And they're also usually the readers that are most excited still about reading. So they're the most fun audience to write about as well.
You know, you bring up a good point. I've noticed that, you know, a lot of people who are really curious in those middle grade ages, when they start to get a little bit older and they start to know more about the world and they start to have a little bit more confidence in themselves, then suddenly that confidence kind of goes on overload and they think they know everything and the curiosity just kind of vanishes. And instead of questions, they just have opinions.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but I guess that's so true. I mean, because once you become a teenager, you're often like less curious about the outside world and more curious about like diving deep into your soul. So you get very brooding and sort of angsty, you know, but like before that, you're more curious about the wider world, which actually I think there would be both like fun audiences to write for, but I am really excited that I got into middle grade first, and then who knows, maybe I'll expand and try to write for other audiences. But I love middle grade. I think it's one of the best audiences to write for.
Well, I agree with you. Those middle grade audiences are some of my favorite to perform for. What's the reaction when you go out and you're meeting your audience and they're giving you feedback about your books?
Yeah, they're definitely the most fun because no matter what, if you're an author and you're going to a school, they think you are famous. And so that's really fun. And they'll come up to you after and be like, please, can you sign this slip of paper? Or can you sign my arm? Or things like that. So it's really, really fun. Like they're definitely the most enthusiastic. And they're so excited to meet authors at that age. So they're for sure my audience to perform.
Yeah. Now you, like, as I mentioned earlier, you've had a variety of really interesting jobs. A children's librarian. You were a Peace Corp volunteer. You taught French. You worked as an overnight staff at a women's shelter. What are there any experiences in those different jobs that you brought into your stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I brought a little bit of something from each of those, and sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's subconscious. But from when I was in the Peace Corps specifically, I was in Kyrgyzstan, which is an amazing place to live. And a lot of people in America, though, have never heard of it. It's a really small country, and it borders Kazakhstan and China. And I lived in this little town that was right in the mountain valley. So either side of the street, you could just walk up a different mountain range, and it's just super small, and you can be in a taxi and you'll have to stop for a herd of sheep or goats just walking across the road. And it was winter, like probably 7 months out of the year, just like super, super cold. So one of the characters from Skeleton Tree, Miss Francine, was inspired by my time there. And so she is also from Kyrgyzstan, and she's always telling stories about her goats and sharing wisdom with the main characters about, you know, her hard life experiences and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So that definitely inspired a character. But it also gave me a new perspective on the world. I think you really have to step outside of yourself and step outside of all of your comforts in order to, you know, change the way you see things, and kind of by viewing them as an observer, it changes your perspective forever. So I definitely feel like I've changed my perspective just on everything, and it's affected my writing, but also my life overall, from living in a different country for a couple of years. But yeah, so many experiences.
Yeah. And being a Peace Corps volunteer, it's certainly different. A different experience than, you know, when a lot of people think of living in a different country, you know, they think of, oh, you go and you study, you know, for 6 months at this university, or you go and take a job in this city. You're really, from my understanding of it, when you're in the Peace Corps, you're kind of, you have some support, but you're also kind of on your own in a lot of ways. You really have to rely on yourself and your own wits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, cause you're doing everything on your own. For part of the time you're living with a local family, and it really depends on your situation. But so I lived on my own for most of my time there as well. And I mean, so you're doing everything yourself in the local language, and you're getting paid a salary that is supposed to be equal to the average local salary. So, you know, I think it was like $200 a month, which is probably like a really high salary over there actually. But I mean, yeah, essentially you are living as a local and totally immersing yourself in the culture as much as possible so that you can be effective in your job that you're doing and just become a part of the community. Mm-hmm. So that was really amazing. And it was really hard to come back too, because you get so used to a certain way of living and it becomes so comfortable, and then trying to readjust to your old life is really difficult as well.
I'm a big supporter, big believer in helping our kids understand that there are all these different cultures, and also it's real important for me to help my kids understand just how lucky they are living where they do, and just how much they have, because oftentimes they see people with even more and they think, oh, woe is me. What kind of ways, other than joining the Peace Corps, what kind of activities can you recommend to families to help their kids kind of understand that there is a bigger world than just their immediate circle of friends and family?
Absolutely. I think volunteering is probably the best way to do that. And that was when I mentioned I worked at the women's shelter when I was in college. And the reason I did that is because I went to college in New Orleans, and it was a great place. But what I noticed is that most of the students would either be on the university campus or in the very touristy areas of New Orleans, and not really seeing or getting involved with the wider community. So I really wanted to get more involved. And that was how I stumbled upon this women's shelter that was just opening, and they needed someone to be there overnight, but they couldn't afford to pay anyone. So I was a volunteer night staff person, and I lived there for my second year in college instead of living in the dorms. And it really worked out because I couldn't afford to live in the dorms anyway. So it was a win-win situation. But that's definitely opened my eyes to things that I'm sure like almost no other college students there experience. I mean, there's a whole other side of life for people who are going through some really desperate times and some huge hardships that you would never see unless you kind of make the effort to get out there and see how you can contribute. So there are lots of things that you can do that don't require living in a place for an entire year. You know, you can go online and search for short-term volunteer opportunities, and I love to do those as well. So whatever you're interested in, I mean, if it's animals, you can volunteer with an animal rescue. All of those opportunities are out there, and you can go, you know, for a weekend or make it an ongoing thing and see what you can do to get involved in the community. And I definitely recommend it. And it's going to help not only your community and you, but it's also going to help you if you in your creative pursuits, because like I said, it really changes the way that you think of the world, and it kind of builds on your understanding, and then you're able to bring that into your whatever creative pursuits you're pursuing.
Yeah. You brought up a lot of really great points. I mean, the first one is just that whole, one of the things that always frustrates me, my daughter chose to, get her degree through an online degree program. Wonderful program. So many benefits to it. But, and one of the things that I heard from folks is, oh, your daughter's going to miss out on the college experience. And I'm like, well, what exactly is that? Well, they have so much fun. They got to go this and the parties. And I'm like, well, you know what? I get a feeling she can experience that in other ways. I love your college experience when you really went out there and you really kind of broadened your scope. You didn't just meet other kids who were kind of in your same kind of situation, just from different parts of the country. You met people who were in different life circumstances and facing very, very different challenges and learning how to deal with those challenges. And for me, I mean, I did something similar when I was in college. I volunteered in inner city schools teaching reading, and I wouldn't have traded that for the world. It really shaped who I was. And so I commend you for doing that. I think that's it is a wonderful thing you did for the community. It's an even better thing that you did for yourself, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that was definitely like that side, the volunteer work that I did during college was basically my biggest takeaway from college. You know what I mean? Like that was the thing that has really stayed with me. Not so much my major in French, which I do not use very often. It was the other stuff I did. It was all of the kind of real life lessons that I learned during college.
Well, I do want to take some time to talk about Skeleton Tree, but before we do, one of the other interesting jobs that you listed was you were a scare actor. I'm not quite sure what that is. Can you kind of let me know?
Yes, absolutely. It was very briefly this October. I had always wanted to work in a haunted house. And so I got the opportunity. We have a Six Flags amusement park here called Frontier City. It's all like Wild West theme. And every year they do big Halloween things, and they set up little zones, and each zone has a particular type of scary character in it, and you can walk through. It's like a little maze, and people scare you along the way. So I got to be one of the actors, and my zone was the clown zone. So I was dressed as a scary clown, and I had this replica Pennywise costume, but I was like the girl version of Pennywise. Although my character, I will say, she had a whole backstory, and her backstory is that she was scared of the other clowns. So she would try to help the people like through the haunted house and be like, follow me. And then we'd run into a scary character. And then of course I'd scream and run away. So, but it was really fun. I mean, I got to see behind the scenes and how everybody prepares and puts on their makeup and their costumes and this sort of training that they give you to be a scare actor. So it was pretty funny.
So you're one of the people who contributed to the phenomenon of being afraid of clowns that forced me to drop my face paint for years and years. And actually appreciate it, because for years it would take a half an hour to put it on, a half an hour to take it off. And then when I stopped wearing it, my life got easier. Of course, unfortunately for the audiences, that meant they had to look at this face, but that's
Oh no, but I can attest to the difficulty of taking off that makeup, though. It just wants to stay in your pores, and you can't get it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when my son was in kindergarten, I had a week-long engagement in another state, performing at a state fair. But I was determined I was going to be one of those dads who went to every single event as long as I could. So I did my gigs, I did my shows, and I jumped in the car and I went down and I attended the first open house and then jumped back in the car and then went back. Little did I know that there was a little bit of blue eyeliner left on the top of my eyelids. And so the talk of the of the parents at that thing was the dad who came in with blue eyeliner on. Now that was 20
That's
years
awesome.
ago.
You're a trendsetter.
There you
I
go.
like it.
Exactly. I was going to say 20 years ago it was kind of scandalous. Right now it wouldn't have been a big deal. No,
It'd be
no
great.
one would have
Yeah.
known. Before we move on to talk about Skeleton Tree, I just want to give everybody out there, if you're in a haunted house and you really want to freak out one of the people in your party, just conspire with your other friends to, when you're in that waiting room, when you're in that quiet waiting room, kind of waiting for things, mention your friend's name about 4 or 5 or 100 times. Because then the actors will hear that, and then they'll come out and they go, Kim, and it freaks people out.
Yeah, that was part of our training, actually, was to listen for the name. And if we heard it, to say it really loud so the next person could hear it. And then, totally.
Yeah, we tried it. We did that with my niece Jimena, and she's like, nah, I don't buy it. No. You just set this up. You're an actor, and I know that you, nah. So,
Funny.
Well, tell us about Skeleton Tree.
Yeah, absolutely. So Skeleton Tree was my first book, and in that story, 12-year-old Stanley is the main character, and he has a little sister named Mirren, who of course he loves, but she can be very annoying, as little sisters probably can be. And in the beginning of the story, he discovers a bone in his backyard. It's just sticking up out of the dirt. It kind of looks like the tip of a little finger, but he's not sure. So he tries to dig up the bones, and he can't do it. Every time he tries to, get a shovel or something in the dirt, it just won't go, but only in that one spot. Like, he can dig anywhere else, but he can't dig up the bone. The next thing he knows, it's not just a little finger, it's an entire skeleton hand sticking out of the ground. And day by day, it grows a little bit more. He's a little creeped out by this, and the whole time he's trying to photograph these bones, but every time he takes a picture, it's just a white blur that appears on his screen, so he can't get a photograph. And eventually you have this entire, skeleton torso sticking out of the ground. And he's like, wow, this is creepy. His little sister, though, is the only one who thinks it's not creepy at all. She's like, no, it's amazing. This skeleton and I are going to be best friends. We're going to have tea parties and dance parties, and it's wonderful. So when she looks at the skeleton, she sees something totally different than everybody else. And some people don't actually see the skeleton at all, because only children and certain special adults can even see the skeleton. So it continues to grow until it's a full-size skeleton. And Stanley still, this whole time, he's trying to get the photograph. But when Mirren, his little sister, starts to get sick, he worries maybe the skeleton is not friendly like his sister thinks. Maybe it's actually the one that's causing her illness. So part of the mystery is deciding not just where the skeleton has come from and why is it here, but is it good or is it evil? So that's kind of the mystery and where the story starts. And I won't spoil the ending for you, but it does have a really cool feature. So if you happen to pick up a copy of Skeleton Tree, make sure to turn the corner of the pages, because there is a flip book. So when you turn the pages in the corner, you'll see a skeleton that waves at you like a moving picture, which is pretty cool.
Very, very cool. Well, I want everybody to take the time to check out Bone Hollow and also the Skeleton Tree. But in the meantime, where can folks go to connect with you online?
Well, they can head over to kimventrella.com, or they can find me on Twitter or Instagram. It's just at Kim Ventrella. And of course, spookymiddlegrade.com too.
Yes, absolutely. And tell us, just take a minute to tell us a little bit about what you folks are up to over at Spooky Middle Grade. If you didn't hear it, Kim and 8 of her other Spooky Middle Grade authors came on the show Christmas Eve, and they actually created an original story based on a prompt that I gave them, and it's spooky and it's also hilarious. Jonathan Rosen just threw in this bizarre swerve at the end that no one saw coming. And to be honest, I mean, I love the spook. The whole thing spooked me out. It was having 9 guests on at the same time. But it went really well. So tell us what you folks are up to now.
Absolutely. Well, we're up to 13 authors now, which is a perfect number. Mm-hmm. And we are doing our free Skype or Google Hangout visits with teachers and librarians across the country. It's really fun because you get to Skype with 4 authors all at the same time, and we just answer all of your students' burning questions. We have a reading challenge as well. So if you read any of our spooky books, for each one you read, you get entered to win cool prizes, which are signed books or swag. We have teacher resources. We have a great blog with lots of interviews and spooky articles. So all kinds of stuff, and just at spookymiddlegrade.com.
That is awesome. Well, we've had the pleasure to speak to the author of Bone Hollow, Kim Ventrella. Kim, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We'll be celebrating National Poetry Month. That's right, April is National Poetry Month. And to help us celebrate, we're welcoming back Laura Chauvin. She is coming to talk to us about the last 5th grade of Emerson Elementary School, a novel in verse. We're also going to just be talking about poetry and how poetry may unlock some love of learning and reading and some reluctant readers. It really is a fascinating conversation. You don't want to miss it. Hey, you also don't want to forget that we're looking for a few great schools or public libraries or churches or youth groups or community organizations to host our brand new family experience, Reading with Your Kids Live. That's right. We're looking to celebrate our shared love of reading and learning with some fantastic storytelling, amazing magic, and totally interactive fun. We're also looking for a few great kids to be part of future episodes of the podcast. Check it all out at our website, readingwithyourkids.com/live. readingwithyourkids.com/live. Hey, we want to thank our buddy Kim Ventrella from the Spooky Middle Grade Authors Group for being here today. Be sure to check out Bone Hollow. I absolutely want to thank my amazing associate producer, Fatima Khan, for being such an amazing and important part of our podcast. We also want to thank you. You do so much for us. I mean, you are out there, you're sharing our links, and there's so many. We see you. It pops up when you're sharing our tweets and our social media posts, when you're sharing things that we post on LinkedIn. Occasionally we post things on Instagram. I have to get better at that. I think I'm going to have my niece take care of our Instagram account. But we want to thank you for supporting us. Thank you for writing reviews and leaving reviews on the iHeartRadio app or an Apple Podcast or wherever you find your podcast. We also want to thank you so much for the most important thing you do, and that's taking care of that beautiful kid of yours. Every time you give that kid of yours a great big love hug, every time you sit down and read to your kid, you're helping to make the world a better place. Hey, I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.